Yes. Yes, please.
I've got a loud voice. I'll just throw out a couple of thoughts and ideas that I have, and then I've got to take off. First of all, you talk about the rec center fees and those kind of things. I use the rec center, but I use it one day a week, pretty much, to go swim. If you were to raise my fee, $5 or $10, $20 a year, I'll probably pay it. It's not that big of a deal for me. You talk about the school zone, and you talk about our community. We have over 65% free reduced lunch kids at our school. Middle school is over 70%. Very low socioeconomics. And so it's really could have an impact on our kids and the use of those facilities. The other thing, talking the other side of it, when you're talking about raising field fees, and again, I've been here for the inception of this thing, and I would just like you to consider this. The field fees have raised, and they are still very low. And just to give you a little background, years ago when we first started our tournaments and that, we started taking all of St. George's business. We started pulling all the teams from St. George. They'd rather come to Mesquite. At that time our fields were a little nicer than what they had, and they liked our atmosphere, et cetera and so on. And I go back to one year in one March, I took 45 teams. That's the max I could take with the fields that we had. Turned about 45 away. And St. George was taking 90 to 100 plus teams on their tournaments, and that started to reverse. And as soon as they built that 7-plex up there, it just started to swing back the other way. So if you're going to raise my fees, give me a facility. If you want my fees to be similar to St. George, give me a facility similar to St. George's. And as the fees have gone up, our services have decreased. That's the only other thing. When it went from 85 to 150, I now have to provide. I have my nephews come up, clean the bathrooms, put the supplies, the toilet paper, and etc. and so on there. So as our fees continue to go up, the services have kind of gone down. That's been one thing that's kind of bothered me a little bit. Is if you're going to charge me a little more, that's fine, but don't cut the services too. So I wish you'd think about that a little bit. And the outside people, I'm going to give you an idea and a suggestion. You can do what you want with it. The money is not in what I do. And I run adult softball, men's softball tournaments. That's not where the money is in youth. When I see what's going on around here, the fast pitch softball, these type of things, they're still in Rocky Mountain baseball, etc. So they're bringing tons of teams. I've got a tournament coming up in 3 weeks. I have 6 teams right now. Probably going to cancel. Because when the economy went south, my program went south. Because these are adults that have families and they can't afford to travel, but people will still spend money on their kids, and that's what they do. So my recommendation for the city, and I've talked to city people about this, that's the direction you ought to go, only thing you ought to look at, and I think you ought to take people like me and tell us thank you and goodbye. I've always said that the city ought to have somebody running this, and forget all the independent tournament directors that are coming in, and you can pay somebody's salary on a Rocky Mountain baseball weekend. You can pay somebody's salary in this city with what they walk out of this city with. Do the math. I know they have expenses and etc. else, but I've told that to other city employees, probably 10 years ago. You need to tell people like me, thank you, but we are going to do it ourselves. St. George does it themselves. They have their own rec program. They have their tournament director. That's all they do, is bring in tournaments. And I think that's something the city ought to consider. Is having someone that's what they do. And no, I'm not interested in the job. But when we started this, we were bringing in college baseball teams, women's college softball. We were bringing in all these things to the city because they asked us to go out and find these things. So that's what I did years ago. And it's just slowly appreciated. The college teams didn't want to come anymore because we didn't have a grass infield, so they didn't want to come and play here in the spring. But BYU, University of Utah, Washington, they were all using this as a spring tournament. They'd come here, bring teams out of Southern California, they meet out here and they play. And the same with junior colleges and etc. and so on. That's all just kind of left because our facilities just never stayed up with what other people were doing around us. So that would be my recommendation. I mean, if you want to raise the fees on somebody like me, that's fine. I'll just kick that back to the teams. I'll probably have fewer. I mean, that's what everybody does, And my expenses continue to go up. That's one of the reasons why I'm thinking about I'm probably done. I don't have the participation mark. I can't afford to lose money. The liability is becoming more and more. But the city has a great opportunity, I think, to take something and probably could do something with it. So, anyway, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Any questions for me before I go support one of our local entities here?
Do they have any questions? Thank you. Thank you for your input.
Real quick, again, I don't want to belabor too much of this. Going over to the rec center, is any other questions about the field use fees? Again, the Parks Department hasn't had any new employees in probably a decade. So, and that's why, you know, when Cliff referenced, you know, the services provided, in order to keep those costs affordable, we have the event manager take care of some of those things that we had to, you know, you'd have to pay to have an employee go do, and you'd have to have somebody on, when you have a 16-hour-a-day tournament, which we have somebody on call to drag the fields and everything, but to do all that on top of it, I don't know what the cost would be there, but again, the mission was to make sure that we're affordable and inclusive, and that it's a safe environment where you can stay on top of things, and the point made, and one of the points of the committee was looking at strategies to have this fund that we can dip into. Sooner or later, we're going to have to replace the synthetic turf at the sport and event complex, whether that's 10 years from now or 15 years from now, if we take care of it and not have any really bad flooding or anything like that. Those things scare me to death when we look at not having anything and seeing what had to be cut out of our proposed budget this past year, and you have that in your packet. But, so going over to the rec center, again, I mentioned it's about a 68% cost recovery. We're also going to have you take a look at, is there any questions about the rec center fees? We probably ought to go over that really quick. There's the page that has a little bit of purple at the top, and that basically takes a look at what would have to do to break even. The rec center budget itself, just salaries, the utilities and all that, is about $600,000 to operate that. And again, I don't think it's wise, but you would have to raise fees by 27% to be able to get to a break-even point. But what does that do to your sales? I mean, just because you raise rates doesn't necessarily mean you recoup that revenue. That's what that purple page is, just to show you what you'd have to do if you did an across-the-board raising of fees using the same number of people. The next page, let's say you were using that retail philosophy, you have a finite number of customers, what do you do to increase revenues? Get them to come back more and more and more. And that's looking at it another way. You keep the fees the same and you increase the number of attendees. That's what that page is all about.
And a comment to what you're saying about raising the fees does not necessarily mean increasing of revenue. I think that was well demonstrated earlier on in the inception of the rec center when the fees were so high and your membership was so low. And then when you reduced your fees, your revenues went up. It's kind of a fine line.
Brian, I've got a question. On the individual classes that you do in the recs, is that included in the monthly cost of, or are they paying extra to take a jazz dance class or exercise? They're paying extra.
Yeah, and that's where I mentioned earlier that our membership went down about 5 or 4%, but fiscal year 2012 was the largest year ever. We had 93,000 paid admissions that year. It's the best, and going back in sportsmen, just to give you an idea, our average is about 77,000 a year steadily over time, and then, boy, something happened in 12. I don't know what it is, Nick, you know what it was? 93,000 last year, we dipped a little bit to 93,000, but our revenues increased because that increased emphasis by our, and we have private contractors do our fitness classes. Nick, go ahead and
on that year,